Today marks Two Humans' 10th anniversary. It debuted on August 19th, 2008, exclusively for the Xbox 360. To call it ambitious, or to mark its history as troubled, would be an understatement. Let's start at the very beginning. Now, Two Human was developed by Silicon Knights. Work began as far back as the original PlayStation. They showed the game off for the first time at E3 1999, and you can still find footage floating around online. While it still resembled a futuristic action shooter, it had nothing to do with Norse mythology at this point. Soon after this, Nintendo and Silicon Knights signed a deal wherein they would make several games for the GameCube, which was great for them, but it meant Two Human would have to be scrapped or at least put on hold for the PlayStation. As you can imagine, since you live in the present, it didn't make it that far on the GameCube either, with only an FMV and some screenshots existing now of that development, as their attention was instead drawn to two other projects: Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and a complete remake of Metal Gear Solid, which was subtitled Twin Snakes. Those two games deserve their own retrospective in terms of the crazy scale, but that's for another date. Let's fast forward 5 years later to 2005, wherein Silicon Knights announced they'd be working on Two Human for Microsoft's new console, the Xbox 360. 3 years later, it was finally out, almost a decade after being shown, so that's just a brief history of its origins, which we'll dive back into later. Let's pause and get into the game itself. Two Human, in its final form, is an action RPG themed around a universe where Norse mythology is engrossed with futuristic technology. You play Baldur, who is trying to find out who killed his wife. That, and trying to figure out why there is a rise of goblins, or basically robotic versions of quote-unquote goblins, among other monsters. Guess what? There's a conspiracy involving other gods. Unfortunately, you're not going to find out everything if you play this game from start to finish, because this was intended to be a trilogy, as if waiting a decade wasn't bad enough. Again, it was ambitious to be sure, but you can tell by playing it that it had a troubled history even before I told you all of that stuff. Again, more on that later. So as I said in the intro, this is an action RPG. It resembles Mass Effect combined with elements of Diablo. At the start of the game, you can choose one of 5 classes for Baldur that determines his abilities. The strangest thing about combat is that melee is mapped to the right analog stick, making things feel awkward right from the get-go. You can use a variety of weapons such as hammers, staffs, swords, along with various guns as your secondary attack, and skills that unlock when you level up via a skill tree, which is actually quite frequent. On the Diablo note, loot is also quite frequent, and since you'll be in the menu a lot looking at gear and allotting points, it's sad that the menu system isn't more user-friendly. That is to say, like a lot of things in this game, it's clunky at best. The most damning part of all this is death. As you can imagine, in a game steeped in Norse mythology, Valhalla and Valkyries are going to play a big role. When you die, you'll have to wait through about 30 seconds of an in-game cutscene where your body falls and the game continues onward as a Valkyrie descends from the heavens, lifts you up, takes you into the sky, and then you suddenly warp back to an arbitrary checkpoint. This is, if it wasn't obvious, a clever gimmick to mask load times. Would it have been better to stare at a blank screen every time you died? I don't know, but what we got instead is incredibly tedious and silly. I will say co-op makes the game better, but only slightly. It's better in the way that watching a bad movie with someone else is more enjoyable than doing it alone. That said, I don't think this is a terrible game. It's just incredibly average, and you can tell that Silicon Knights and its director, the infamous Dennis Dyack, had a lot of good intentions with this game. The gameplay and setting are at least unique, and despite a lot of setbacks, it's not the worst thing on Xbox 360. So why won't this game ever see the light of day again? Well, during development, since the initial deal with Microsoft in 2005, Silicon Knights also made an agreement with Epic to use Unreal Engine 3 for development. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to even try and get into the terminology of everything, but let's just say Silicon Knights tried to sue Epic, Epic countersued, and in the end, Epic won the dispute in 2012. They won money, obviously, but here's the more interesting part. Silicon Knights had to recall every copy still on store shelves, as well as take down the game on Xbox Live. This was issued at the beginning of 2013, so you'd think by 2018 this game should be incredibly rare and valuable now, right? Well, not really. Used games are aplenty and pretty cheap, plus just browsing on Amazon, I found a new copy being sold by Microsoft for under $30. This is 5 years after the recall. Does Epic just not care about it? And that's the whole thesis of this retrospective. Does anyone care about the fate of 2 Human? After playing it for myself, I can certainly say I don't. As a game, that is. As a story, I find it incredibly fascinating. So while it may not be one of the greats, it will remain a fascinating piece of video game history, and that's something at least. My name is Tristan, and you've been watching ReActionExaminer, wherein I do my best to create interesting videos to entertain and educate you fine folks. Be sure to subscribe, that helped me out a lot. And if you want to check out more, be sure to read my work over on The Gamer, wherein I write fun little listicles. You can also drop by my personal website, GameJerk, wherein I post other articles and reviews. All these links and more can be found in the description below. Thanks, and see you all next time.